Rick Davis, both Bloomberg Politics contributors. Jeannie now, of course, is a senior fellow at the, there's a long title here.
Yes, there is. We'll
and yet
get
it's
that
not.
for you.
Yeah, Jeannie has a new
too
job.
long.
She also is a professor at Iona University, and Rick Davis, Republican strategist. We all know that well. Jeannie, when we consider the week that Joe Biden had in contrast to the week that Donald Trump had, Joe Biden, yes, was abroad, being able to seem presidential on a trip to the G7. And yet, how much do foreign policy wins, like the ones he was able to notch up in recent days, actually matter as he campaigns for re-election? Or is it more domestic wins, like getting all of the members of your party in Congress to cheer alongside you in Washington, D.C., that will ultimately matter?
I think for Joe Biden, he wants to distinguish himself from Donald Trump, and he was able to do that in a very concerted way on the trip to Normandy for D-Day, and of course at the G7 with these two big accomplishments that you were just talking with Anne Maria about, the 50 billion loans to Ukraine and the long-time security agreement. So that White House and the campaign are very happy with those. Of course, he hasn't forgotten about the campaign. He's coming back here for a fundraiser. And they have also been making a good deal of President Trump, the campaign that is, some of his statements yesterday with Republicans. So they are moving along that line. Domestic policy always going to play bigger than foreign policy in an election like this. But he wants to look presidential, and he did in the last several weeks.
What do you think of the takeaways here, Rick? We're talking about $50 billion for Ukraine. That in itself could be called success for this administration, considering the debate we just went through domestically here in the U.S. Did he get enough done to make this worth it?
You know, I think that there's progress there. Obviously, like Jeannie said, anytime you can put this kind of money together, especially leveraging Russian assets, it's a good thing. Kind of harken back a little bit to Donald Trump, you know, during the debate over the supplemental, saying, just give them a loan. And I know it's apples and oranges, but it is entertaining to find such an echo across the pond in this case. I would say, though, there is some brewing discontent. In addition to the G7, there's a secretaries meeting of NATO where the United States is under some, I think, worthy criticism for, you know, constantly moving the red line on what we're willing to do. There are still no F-16s flying the skies of Ukraine for Ukraine. There is continued debate over whether or not we can use our weapon systems that we've given them to attack Russian spots in Russia. And this is one of the things that the rest of Europe seems unified on, and we're the outlier. And we've been the outlier so many times. And then to cave, this administration has really sent mixed signals. So I think that there certainly are some wins, but I think there's some trouble on the horizon when it comes to being aligned with our NATO allies.
And obviously, the trouble on the horizon for NATO allies or other world leaders comes in part due to a question of uncertainty as to who is going to be leading the United States come January of 2025. And a lot that will factor into that outcome includes not just these foreign policy issues, but what's happening domestically as well, including the economy, which we know is a weak spot for President Biden. And Rick, I know you always love when the University of Michigan releases its consumer sentiment data. It wasn't looking good today. You have sentiment much lower than anticipated, inflation expectations much higher. That doesn't signal that things are getting better for the U.S. consumer or voter as we get closer to the election.
You're absolutely right. I wait on bated breath for those Michigan consumer sentiment indexes that came out this morning. And look, I mean, the estimate was supposed to be 72, and it came in at 65. This was a major disappointment for the administration and for anybody who thinks that the public is starting to see the economy improve. It's actually the opposite. And when you dig in, the data even gets worse and worse from a point of view of how people feel about inflation and how they feel like it's affecting their own personal financial situation. And I think all of this really has a resounding effect on politics. If you aren't happy with your personal financial situation, if you believe inflation is higher than it is, you believe the unemployment rate is stronger than it is on record, and if you don't think your future financial prospects are great, why in the world would you vote for a party in power? And I think this is the single biggest hurdle in the Biden administration. It's got nothing to do with demographics. It's all about the economy.
Well, What do you think, Jeannie? Because after that CPI report and the Fed meeting this week, maybe it's no wonder that Joe Biden is predicting interest rate cuts. How much do his election chances ride on that?
It rides an awful lot on the economy overall, inflation and cost in particular. I would say, obviously, the consumer numbers are not great, but we have seen better numbers on the economy for Joe Biden. We had a poll out of the Financial Times and the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, which showed that people trusting him more on the economy. His numbers were much better in the month of June. So, but it remains a tough spot for him. But I would say they have done a better job in responding to this. And I would note when the CPI came out earlier this week, the first thing that the campaign in the White House said was costs are too high. And they also are starting to grasp what people don't like about Donald Trump, at least some of them, which is they think that Donald Trump is all out for himself and his rich friends. And they are starting to make that case. And of course, Trump's appearance before the Business Roundtable, when he's talking about lowering the corporate tax, not even holding it steady, but lowering it further. When people are worried, you look all over TikTok about the cost of everything. So Joe Biden's got to keep hammering. I am for you and people like you. He is for the wealthy billionaires like him. And of course, there was an ad out yesterday from the Democrats, which made this case. So, you know, they have a lot of work to do, but they're starting, I think, to grasp what the message should be if they could just get their surrogates on board and get out there and make it in a more concerted way.
Well, Jeannie, we know that Joe Biden next week is going to begin debate prep. It's less than 2 weeks from today, that first debate between him and Trump. Should he be telling voters in that debate that the economy is good or bad?
He should be telling them that it is getting better, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be, that costs are way too high. And guess what? If this guy gets in, meaning Donald Trump, he is going to lower taxes like he did last time for his billionaire friends. He doesn't care about you. He cares about himself. He's running to stay out of jail and to lower his own taxes. And he even said it to his oil billionaire friends, and he said it again to the CEOs. So that's the kind of case he's got to keep making. Not so much policy-based, but I'm for you, he's for him and them. That's got to be the message on the economy.
Well, great conversation, as always. Jeannie, thank you. Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributor and senior democracy fellow with the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. That is it. Yes, indeed. And of course, Rick Davis, Bloomberg Politics contributor partner at Stone Court Capital. We thank you both, as always, for the insights and the analysis. They will be back with us on the late edition of Balance of Power. That's at 5 p.m. Washington time. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons in Washington. This is Balance of Power as we bring you